Hey there. I just wanted to give an update on the status of my integration of the Sneaky Kitty Games framework with the Lyra Starter Project. And so this came about because Lyra has so many great features and implements the game playability system, and has a bunch of the UI stuff already built into it. And I didn't want to give that up in my game development process, having developed a third-person game up to a certain point with Lyra, but wanting to now make it a first-person game. And I wanted to also make sure to have production level procedural animation stuff for first person shooter, as well as a solid modular framework on the back end for a first person shooter framework. And that's exactly what Sneaky Kitty Games shooter framework is. The level of C++ code and development and active development of it's pretty amazing. And so I'm trying to combine those two things together to leverage the positives of both those frameworks and work them together in order to kind of go forward faster and be pretty solid with what I'm making. So that's kind of the why of what I'm doing here. And in terms of the how and where I'm at right now, posted a couple of quick test videos that showed some decent promise with integrating the two. And I was just trying to figure out what level of C++ was I going to have to kind of break into the code base to kind of do the integration. And so far, because Sneaky Kitty Games shooter framework is so modular, and Lyra is built in a very modular way, I haven't had to do a lot of C++ work. In fact, only one major change, which is great because I only have to remember that I've changed the code base one time. And so let me kind of go through and show a little bit about what this is in terms of where I'm at with it. So I'm going to show where I'm at, and then and I'll show kind of the general overview of how I've gotten here. I'll do a more in-depth tutorial on the kind of step-by-step process here, but just to show kind of what this looks like from the beginning. So okay, so if I play two editors, you can see client is up here in the top. So all of the movement and the procedurals in terms of aiming is all replicated because Lyra's a replicated framework, as well as Sneaky Kitty Games framework is all replicated C++ backend. So all that stuff is working really well now. Very smooth in terms of getting the first-person perspective to not be too jerky or kind of the camera bumping around. So aiming is also working. So aiming down sights is also working. I have the movement sway for the firearm is all there, and that's all based on Sneaky Kitty Games shooter framework, and that's all part of that system, and that's all working. I have it tuned down kind of a bit because it's some of the sway settings are a little bit high for my taste on this weapon. So yeah, but all that ADSing is working, and you can see up in the print log up in the corner of the screen that this is happening on a game playability. So I've taken the start aiming and stop aiming functions from the Sneaky Kitty Games frameworks procedural code and integrate that into the game playability system for Lyra. So this is working on gameplay tags and enhanced input context mappings, and it's fully working both on the client and on the server. So yeah, so it's working really well, and so I'll show you how that goes. So all the movement stuff is basically kind of basic movement, jump, all that stuff, movement stuff is all kind of basically figured out. Other thing that's happening here, if you notice, is that when I do go into ADS, my movement speed slows down. So I'm running at one speed when I'm not ADSing, and as soon as I go to ADS, I'm moving at a slower speed. Again, that's being done in the gameplay ability, and I can show you kind of what that's about. So yeah, so this is working now, and it's really promising. I mean, it's really yeah, it seems like it's not going to be as big of a deal as I thought. I do think that I'm going to have to be creative with integrating the attachment systems and the weapon systems in both games, both frameworks. But we'll get there when we get there. So, but this is a good start. So anyway, so that's the you can see with Lyra you get all the HUD stuff, right, which is pretty awesome. So stop playing editor. Okay, so in terms of let me just go back and show you the one thing I had to change in code. Okay, it's really one simple thing. So Lyra, I'm using Writer. So the Lyra framework, it ties the camera. It's so it's so third person centric that it binds the camera, creates the default camera object um, in the Lyra character, and the camera object gets associated with a camera mode that's set up in Lyra. So there's a bunch of camera mode stuff here. One of them being a third-person camera mode. And so this third-person camera mode takes control of the camera right from the beginning. And almost everything I've tried to get around this by changing the camera mode itself and by changing the third-person camera mode settings has led to just not very great, in fact, broken camera functionality. And so what I've done here, and this is the one kind of, I'm trying not to change Lyra code base at all, taking the modular plugin route, which I'll show you in a second. But I did have to change this because I could not figure out a way to get the camera modes to play nice with first-person shooter no matter what I did. Changing the curves, changing the parameters, all that stuff led to some strange results. So I basically just had to stop the character from creating its own camera, and I ended up just doing that in Blueprint instead. So I literally, these 3 lines of code, got rid of the initialized object pointer in the .h file, and in the CPP file just stopped it from creating the default object here, and just commented those those code lines out. So if Lyra at this point is to be updated, I just have to remember that I did these 2 things to get this to work. Everything else is pretty much working within the 2 frameworks. I just wanted to show that I tried creating my own camera, destroying whatever camera was created by the Lyra character, and then kind of respawning my own character's camera, attached to the socket and all that stuff. But Lyra's camera manager just grabs onto that camera that it's created in the initialization process here, and just starts to mess with it in a way that isn't productive for first-person shooter. I can't show you that because I've kind of gone past it, but just trust me that this, for now at least, until I learn either more about camera modes or get beyond this, this was the fastest, easiest way to kind of get through that. So that's really the only C++ code change I've had to do so far. Everything else right now is just integrating the 2 frameworks on the editor side. So yeah. So in terms of the hero, so basically I did create my own character class, and so then this is kind of through the chain in the Lyra framework. There's a series of characters that are basically kind of parented one with more complexity to the next. And if you don't know the Lyra framework, that's fine. I'll go through a tutorial at some point that shows a little bit about this. But in general, the reason you're building game features, and let me show you that. So I'm, my game's Metal on Metal. I'm using my own game feature plugin, which you can create through the plugins, and there's videos on how to do that, but I'll show it in a later video. This plugin is a game feature, and these game features are intended to be modular. So these game features are intended to be very explicit in what they reference. So if you create a game feature plugin, by its default, it can look back up to the top level of the content directory, which is the kind of the Lyra Games shared content, and it can grab things from here, but it can't grab other things from other game features unless you enable that. And my goal here is to get create my game and my framework, my plugin, without any reliance on Shooter Core, for a couple reasons. One, I don't necessarily think I need all of Shooter Core content's capabilities, but secondly, because in order to integrate these 2 things together, I just need to take it one step at a time. There's just no way. I tried going straight into Shooter Core, and things break right away, and you're like searching down rabbit holes to try to figure that out. And so for me, it's a process of just doing the work of one step at a time, just getting things kind of together. So so this is a game feature plugin. So it references content from here, but it doesn't, and from its own internal directory, but it doesn't reference content from Shooter Core. If I need anything from here, I just copy it from here into mine, or up here into this top, usually into mine, and use it from there, so that everything is kind of modular in that one thing. So that's just something simple from basic to Lyra and the way it's built. So the character itself is a hierarchy of going from the character default to the hero default, and then the hero default is the parent of this class. All of these are, even down to the default character, have been reparented to my own on Metal C++ character class, which is just literally a child class of the C++ class in my own C++ directory. So, but there's nothing in this yet. So this is really just a basic kind of starting point. Nothing there special. So there's nothing special about this that differentiates it from the Lyra character at this point. Even the camera things that I was doing aren't implemented in this. So there's nothing special about that. So the hero is just the hero class, and then basically adding in both a first-person shooter camera, which is then parented to the socket. So this is all stuff you should have seen, know how to do from Sneaky Kitty Games frameworks tutorial videos. And that, on the mesh, basically all of the bones are the same, in terms of setup, the way that Sneaky Games shooter framework sets it up. So you got all the virtual bones that he has you set up. You have the blend mask, and the firearm backbone sockets and the firearm collision virtual bones. So all that stuff is set up in the skeleton the same exact way as in the tutorial framework. No changes there, so that's the same stuff. And so then in terms of the Anim blueprint, this is so it'd be kind of an understatement to say that Lyra's animation blueprint is complicated. It's really complicated, but once you kind of get a handle on what it is, you can kind of start to figure out what you're doing with it. And honestly, having gone through the smart locomotion stuff that I went through, which is based on Lyra, kind of as a simplified version, gave me some insights into how exactly all this is working, even though I knew a little bit about it. So I'm actually kind of removing all of this. So all of this is kind of, I'm bypassing all that. So basic locomotion stuff is happening here, and then I'm basically going through and doing what we did in the tutorial with Sneaky Kitty Games Framework for now. This is again for now, to get this to work, to test it out. Hip fires running into procedurals, and so then eventually what this will happen is we'll end up doing this in a kind of more Lyra-like way, where animations will get layered into another linked anim layer with all the different animations for the weapons will again get linked and sent into this, which will then go through the layered blend per bone stuff. And then I'm bypassing all of this other aiming stuff because again, we're doing all of our aiming differently now with Sneaky Kitty Games procedurals. And then full body skeletal controls. I'll show you where that comes into play. And then all this control rig stuff, removing that because I've had so many problems with trying to figure out how to get this to work. There are some, how do you say, I mean, I guess you could redo this control rig to get back something that you lose when you do this, because you do lose a little bit with this, and I'll show you what that is. But the full body skeletal controls, which are up here in the item anim layers, which is a linked item anim layers. Here basically, this is just the way Lyra is set up. If you're not familiar with this, then we'll have to go step by step through this. But the linked item anim layers are there, and full body skeletal controls is a layer, an item anim layer within that. And within that item anim layer, I removed some of these two bone IKs that are related to Lyra weapons and just replaced them with the Sneaky Kitty Games procedural IK stuff right here. And this is for scaling down the weapon bone when you're doing other things. You don't want to see the weapon vaulting, whatever you're doing. So anyway, so that's where this goes. So if you're familiar with how to set up a character in the Sneaky Kitty Games tutorial, then you know what this is, and you know that this goes somewhere. Well, in the Lyra framework, it goes here to work. Okay, so all of that is, yeah, it's happening through here. And then, so, in testing out in the hero, basically this is, again, the character. There's certain things you just kind of have to do the Lyra way, which is to say, you have to wait until everything's possessed. You have to wait till the experience is ready. If you don't know what an experience is, it's a Lyra specific kind of like game mode in a sense. And then you can spawn the firearm there. And then on begin play, you kind of do this kind of pawn extension. You can get this from the other hero, actor, and shooter core, this logic. But you basically kind of wait until this is initialized before showing the character. Here's where you basically just spawn in a basic, when your character spawns in, the way that Lyra is set up, it has a differentiation between the mesh that is actually kind of working on the back end, which is an invisible mesh, and a character parts mesh so that you can swap in pawn cosmetics on the fly. So that means you can change skins and all that stuff. That's why it's kind of powerful. And then this pawn cosmetics basically just is a kind of copy source from target animation post-process animation blueprint, which then follows basically this invisible mesh here. So this cosmetic component mesh is basically just following what this invisible mesh is doing, and that allows you to change this out at runtime without interfering with this kind of more root-based or kind of the root character mesh there. So then, yeah, so we have to link in the anim layers we want. So I'm using the rifle anim layers, and then responding the firearm, just like they do in the Sneaky Kitty Games tutorial example. So yeah, so it's pretty simple. Well, I should say it's pretty straightforward once you have an understanding of some of the basics in all of these kind of frameworks. Then it becomes not too difficult. Yeah, it can get daunting for sure, but it is kind of get into it. So yeah, so I don't know, did I show what this is about? So once you, yeah, so once you basically have it all set up, you can kind of you get all the kind of great stuff with Lyra as well as all the stuff you get with Sneaky Kitty Games. So I'll just keep posting videos and do some more like step-by-step tutorial breakdowns for it. My suggestion is that you can attempt this if you don't have any knowledge of Lyra, but it gets deep really quick and it can get pretty daunting pretty fast. So my suggestion is you do have a little bit of experience with Lyra. To start with, it is a complicated framework, and even I'm just digging into it. But yeah. Oh, so I guess yeah. The one last thing is just this is ADSing basically on the ability. So we're activating the ability here, and that activation of that ability happens through an input mapping context and a granted ability tag that's activated. So when that ability tag is activated by that input mapping context and the input action that's associated with that input mapping context and the Lyra input config, sets the tag. So when the tag is set to ADS, then that tag propagates, replicates through the system, and basically the characters that are implementing that tag on the local side and on the server side are going to do the action, the gameplay ability associated with that tag. Well, ADS obviously is ADSing, but Lyra uses a camera-based ADS system and doesn't do a procedural aiming thing. So with the ADS in the when you're combining the two, you need to you still want to use the Sneaky Kitty Game shooter pawn components references back to the backend C++ code for those functions. So you can just take, because it's incredible how modular Sneaky Kitty Game shooter framework is. You can just take the shooter, get your Lyra character, get the shooter pawn component, and call functions on the shooter pawn component in an ability. So like start aiming and stop aiming are being started and stopped in the ability itself, and then all the movement stuff is happening because you're grabbing, again, you're grabbing the character, you're grabbing the movement component, and then you're setting what the speed was, so whatever its initial default speed was, to hold on to that, and then you're setting out ADS multiplier, and then you're waiting until the input is released. So this is a specific gameplay ability ability task waiting protocol, so it waits kind of asynchronously until you're done releasing the button, and then you cancel and end the ability, and then calling end ability basically just stops aiming and then sets the speed back to the regular speed of the character. So once you understand how the gameplay ability system kind of works in general, then understanding Lyra becomes much easier, and the logic kind of just unfolds for you. It can take a little while to get there, but yeah, once you understand, it's pretty clear. Yeah, so that's kind of where things are right now. Pretty excited about being able to kind of bring these two things together. I'll make a tutorial that shows more explicitly how to go through and create your own game feature plugin so you can work outside of Shooter Core and kind of build up your own game within Lyra using the Sneaky Kitty Games shooter framework. And yeah, we'll kind of do that over the course of however long, and plan on going forward with this until I either hit my own roadblocks or run out of time. Okay, thanks guys, appreciate it.